Hello, my name is Erin Burkhart. I am currently majoring in criminal justice, and I'm going to talk about how important DNA evidence is. DNA contains genetic information that is found in chromosomes, which is located in the nucleus in our cells. DNA can be found in blood, semen, saliva, urine, feces, hair, teeth, bone tissues, and cells. Investigators can obtain DNA evidence from masks, gloves, clothing, weapons, a sexual assault kit, fingernail scrapings, a hairbrush, also a toothbrush, condoms, rope, and anything at a crime scene that is deemed worthy of DNA. In order to collect DNA, the job falls on CSI investigators, which stand for Crime Scene Investigation. A CSI, in order to collect DNA or evidence, will use a Q-tip to collect blood, semen, or tissue evidence. There are three major ways to collect DNA. Low-level DNA, which is also referred to as touch DNA, refers to cells' skin on an object. In most cases, blood and fingerprints will not be found at a crime scene, so it falls on lifting the skin cells off an object. The second is reference samples, which compares two sets of DNA, usually one from a crime scene and one taken from a suspect. If they are matched, the suspect is taken in to be questioned. That does not mean he's guilty then. The third DNA technique is elimination samples, which refers to samples being taken at a crime scene from witnesses, family members, loved ones, and analysis at the crime scenes. In order to eliminate their DNA from the crime and to not mix up the DNA codes, the people who conduct DNA analysis are analysts working in laboratories that are connected to the FBI's National DNA Index System, or referred to as NDIS. A minimum of bachelor's degrees needed in chemistry and biology. When DNA samples are submitted to a laboratory, they follow a strict process of rules, the first being extraction, which means removing DNA from a cell. Quantitation is the second one, which is to understand how much DNA you have. You do not want to have too little because you can only do it once, removing the cells from the DNA. The third is amplification, which means producing multiple copies of DNA so you can store and save those DNA copies for later in case the DNA samples get corrupted. The fourth being separation, which means separating the amplified DNA in order to get identification. The fifth is analysis and interpretation, comparing DNA evidence samples to a known DNA sample. The sixth and final is quality assurance, which is reviewing the analysis report of accuracy in order to see if they are unbiased. A way to make sure DNA profiling is unbiased. When DNA is being tested, not only is the suspect's DNA included, but also a mixture of other DNA from other cases or just random DNA to make sure there is no profiling and biased opinion in the DNA. Most label evidence is obtained with numbers, not names and not dates, numbers. DNA evidence does not mean it's 100% foolproof. Just because a DNA matches a suspect does not mean they are guilty. The DNA could have been there before the crime happened or after the crime happened. It is not like a TV show like CSI or even Criminal Minds that says once there's DNA, they are guilty. It has been proven in court cases like the most popular one, the case of the century, the O.J. Simpson case, where the attorneys showed all of the evidence that could be proven to make O.J. guilty. Blood samples, fingerprints, bloody gloves, bloody socks. But the defendant's attorneys, instead of questioning if the DNA was really his, they were questioning how it was processed and how it could get altered from biased police officers, who one officer was considered as being on tape as using racial slurs. The verdict was not guilty, even though all the DNA evidence was there and was proven to be correct by analysts. The jury still had unreasonable doubt because it did not fully understand DNA and believed more what the defendant's attorneys were saying. As stated by Joseph Wambaugh, who is a best-selling writer who writes accounts for police work. He was quoted as saying, "The O.J. Simpson case, they had no understanding of that DNA evidence and didn't want to," which means a rush of evidence thrown into court to put away a man who was famous, who was O.J. Simpson. Now, I'm young, so I don't remember O.J. before, but I assure from my parents, from others, that he was famous and he was beloved. The jury did not understand the DNA case that were brought to them. Instead, they were bombarded with statistics and terms that they would not understand, which means, again, that evidence of DNA does not mean someone is guilty. In an article written by Michael Bizzle named "Is DNA Evidence Enough?" stated in his article with interview David H. Kay, a professor of law, that DNA evidence can be disputed, and also how the public view of evidence can be disputed by the view of TV shows. DNA guidance has its disadvantages, but without it, the justice system would really solely focus on what he said against he said. DNA evidence is very important to understanding how a crime was committed and by whom, even though sometimes DNA evidence is solid, the person will be found not guilty, but it still proves how many cases today have put our justice court system in the future and moving in the right system. Thank you.